Pretend Ramon's House of Math, the Saturday Buddha. If you know anything about the techniques of the, how should we call them, ancients, or perhaps just the occulted, you know that one of the techniques is a location technique. So in your mind, you could be walking down a garden path, or maybe you're looking around your living room or your kitchen, and you use each one of the places in your kitchen as a peg for your memory. So if you're, you have a countertop, and then you have your stove, and then you have your sink. So there's three places where you could put something to remember. So it could be a shopping list. It could be a phone number where you put three digits on the stove, and then three digits on the counter, and then three digits in the sink. Well, actually, four digits in the sink. Anyway, there's lots of ways to use location for memory. All right, this is location for memory on the garden path outside. And when you come to the Saturday Buddha, which day is Saturday? Oh, the seventh day is Saturday. What are you looking at? You're looking at the Trivium. You're looking at the Buddha that has acquired knowledge, has mastered how to think, and therefore has attained a form of enlightenment, a degree of enlightenment. So here's the Trivium, and I'm going to do this from memory. First is the grammar stage. That's the stage we build everything on. I have built a whole page about this. And then the next stage is the logic and reasoning stage, where you build upon, see this right here, they're connected. You build upon the grammar, the words, the knowledge that you've gotten when it comes to language. And that can be the language around many different things: law, English, other languages, Spanish, Chinese, Thai, whatever it is. Okay, so this is the grammar stage. Then comes logic and reasoning, where you think about what you have learned. And then this is rhetoric. And then upon that foundation, and rhetoric is your ability to express your logic and reasoning using your grammar. So here is rhetoric. And upon that foundation sits the many sided lotus. And then upon that lotus sits the Saturday Buddha. Androgynous, you may notice. Let's take a look. Ooh, this is a human, not a demon. We know this because it has nipples. Let's see here. And the crown of the awakened. Now, what does she have? Snakes coming out of her back? No, this here is the trivium. Here is, again, grammar, logic, and reasoning, rhetoric. That's the trivium. Now, what is in the center of the trivium? Mathematics. Mathematics. Then we have geometry. Let none who enter here be ignorant of geometry. Music and astronomy. There are the liberal arts. There is the quadrivium and the trivium, represented in a statue. And my boys went to go visit. That's one interpretation. But this is the liberal arts. This is the foundation of thinking. This is one who has attained and sits upon the foundation of the trivium, the ability to think. It doesn't tell you what to think, it tells you how to think. And the way you learn how to think is with the trivium, mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy. All right, another interpretation of this seven is even more ancient interpretation, and that would be the Hermetic principles. So what you're seeing there are the seven Hermetic principles. And from memory, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna look at my notes so I don't mess up. But the first principle, the principle that the foundation is mentalism. So here, mentalism. And then the next is the principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity. Notice how polarity is in the center, where you have uh, mentalism, correspondence, and vibration. But polarity, we live in a polar world. Then the principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect, and finally, the principle of gender. And if you look carefully, um, this statue, that could be a man, that could be a woman. There are other lessons and other stories and other knowledge contained in other places on this garden path. And if you are initiated, you know the stories behind each. It's not just a pretty statue, it's a representation of knowledge. It's knowledge encoded in physical form. So here is the Trivium, the seven Hermetic principles in gold. And there's more here, but I'll stop there. But you should be able to look at some of these things and understand what you're looking at via the addendum with regard to the trivium. This right here is applied to whatever it is. Mathematics has its own grammar, its own language, and then the logic and reasoning applied to that language, and then your rhetoric. There's your formulae, being able to speak mathematically or read the mathematics. Chemistry, same thing, has its own language, its own logic and reasoning of how things go together. There are rules for balancing equations, etc. And then your ability to do alchemy. Oops, nope, not anymore. But anyway, your ability to express what happens when you mix chemicals. Let's see. Law, of course. You need to know what the words mean. Then you need to understand the maxims that apply those words. And those maxims are the foundation of the rhetoric that's been codified into statute. But down here in logic and reasoning, it's very simple. We have very simple common law. But the common law is expansive because your rights are given to you by God and are almost innumerable. You have tangible rights and intangible rights. Anyway, and then the ability to express those rights on paper to others. Let's see here. Anyway, the foundation of knowledge. You can go through anything. Just plain chess. Chess has its own language. The names of the pieces, the names of the moves, and then the logic and reasoning behind the game, and then your ability to play the game and explain it to others, what you're doing. This is the trivium, the foundation of knowledge applied. Once you learn this, then you can teach yourself anything. That's why many men were self-taught in times of old, because they were taught the trivium. And then if they wanted to learn law or whatever it was, they could teach themselves. And they were expected to know at least some basics in mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy. Be able to look up at the sky and name some stars. Where are you? And then if you take astronomy a little further, you know when certain stars rise and when certain stars set. That's not what's happening, but we'll say that's what's happening. Knowledge encoded in statue form, in physical form. There are other places where a book would be encoded in a building. You're familiar with this in many cathedrals where the Stations of the Cross tell the story of the crucifixion of Jesus. And at each frame or at each picture, you're supposed to memorize what happened in that story or in that what's being portrayed in that picture, in that usually in stained glass. Anyway, the idea is we have forgotten quite a bit of knowledge, and we're waking up to the fact that it's all around us. The ancients put it in stone, put it in gold, and then fools who were greedy made it so that this is paint. But there was a time, especially in South America, where much of the statuary was in gold. They didn't use it for money. But fools, of course, melted down the statues and the knowledge that went with. All right, Ruth Hunter Ramon's houseofmath.com. There's a whole page talking about the Trivium, the Quadrivium, Maria Montessori, and Mortensen Mathematics. So check out Ruth Hunter Ramon's House of Math for more.